Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of The Divine Fury, a Korean horror film from 2019. So this film begins with our protagonist as a little kid, and he's making some delicious looking breakfast. He looks like a pretty good cook, actually. Unfortunately for him, that evening, his father is killed by a person who is secretly possessed by a demon. Now, as a consequence to losing his father, this kid loses faith in God. We cut to years later. He grows up, and now he's a mixed martial arts fighting champion. But his past comes back to haunt him because he develops stigmata, which is like, bloody holes, I guess, in your palm. And he ends up teaming up with a Vatican priest to perform exorcisms. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're expecting, word on the street on this one is that this is a mashup. It's like a mix between like martial arts film and exorcism film, right? That's what I was hearing about this before getting into it. If you're expecting a crazy action horror flick that features some dude beating the crap out of demons with MMA maneuvers, you're probably going to be disappointed in this. You might be. The fact that our main character is a champion fighter really doesn't even come into play into the conflict until like the end of the movie, where we finally get kind of a substantial fighting sequence against the demons, like a martial arts style fight sequence. But that's only at the very end of the film. Okay, so do not go into this expecting like a demon fighting movie per se. The Divine Fury is definitely more of a horror movie than it is an action movie. This revolves around exorcisms, more traditionally, I guess you could say. The dream sequence that causes our character's stigmata near the beginning, and then the shadow spirit attack near the beginning are two examples of what to expect from this, as is the shaman scene early on. So, however, I will say that there are a few bells and whistles, there are a few that give this a little bit of a different feel. Okay, so for example, the demon possessions are in part initiated by a human spellcaster who is himself possessed by a demon. So you get some ritualistic ceremonies that are actually pretty neat. I've always been a fan of like occult elements in movies, and we do get some of that here, which I enjoyed. So it is a little bit different in that regard. It's not just like one person strapped to a bed with two priests over it like the whole movie. Although you do get some scenes like that. Okay, but this does have a little bit more going on. Also, there's some very stylish urban environments. Create a different feel for an exorcism film. Like for example, there are some very gorgeous set designs in this that are showcased. There's like a dance club with like neon lighting and stuff. The bad guy hangs out at this club and kind of drives an awesome car when he's not like, possessing people to like kill people and stuff. So at least he's terrorizing souls in style. At least you get that. There are a few other weird aspects that I won't spoil for you, but The Divine Fury does make an effort to distinguish itself from a typical exorcism film, so I appreciated that. And despite the relative lack of action throughout the runtime, we do get a cool hand-to-hand fight sequence at the end of the film, where the protagonist must defeat a small handful of these demon-possessed humans. It's a good scene, nicely shot, and entertaining. So The Divine Fury reunites director Joo-hwan Kim and actor Seo-joon Park, who worked together previously on Midnight Runners, which is actually a pretty good film in its own right. I never reviewed that one, but it is pretty good, and it's worth checking out. It's more like a comedy. Sung Ki-an has a major role here as well. He plays the exorcist priest. So, when you're thinking of a Vatican priest, you might think it's like played by a Caucasian actor, but not in this case. Sung Ki-an is working for the Vatican. The first time I remember seeing this actor, or at least noticing him, is when I saw Musa the Warrior for the first time years ago. He was awesome in that movie. A veteran actor, very reliable, always gives a good performance. So it's nice to see him in this, as it is to see him in anything. But The Divine Fury is limited by certain aspects. For example, the religious content itself, very cliche, nothing new here. You get the typical crisis in faith angle that you see in like every exorcism film, right? Not especially deep or interesting in that regard. The villain, not really developed that much or interesting from a content or character standpoint. The first meeting between our protagonists seems to be based on chance, unless I missed something. Like Park's character just so happens to be in the area when An's character's having trouble fighting a demon-possessed human. That's an example of like a script writing aspect that could have been improved on, I think. And then there are a few very brief CGI shots that are pretty bad. There's one at the very beginning of the film that kind of made me worry. I'm like, are we going to get a lot of this? There's a scene in a car where a woman, is possessed by a demon, and she makes like a weird demon face, but it's not prosthetics. It's like CGI, and it looks really bad. And I was like, ooh, are we going to get a lot of that? But we don't. There's only like a few brief shots of that, so don't get worried in that opening sequence. But it's still, you'll notice this when you watch it. I mean, I do think that The Divine Fury is an entertaining horror movie with a bit of action that's backloaded near the end. But I do feel like this was a bit of a missed opportunity because it could have distinguished itself even more if it chose to accentuate the mixed martial arts fighting aspect during the first 75% of the film. This could have been like the Korean answer to something like the Blade films with Wesley Snipes. You just have the Korean kind of version of that where you got this dude just pounding on demons the whole time, which would have been a lot of fun to watch. Because, we've already seen some slow-paced and creepy exorcism-style films from Korea, right? You got The Wailing, which is a big one. You got Faithless Hell from back in 2009, which is really good. And The Priest just came out a few years ago as well. So it would have been nice to get more of like a fun, high-octane version of those films. You don't really get that here. But still, The Divine Fury is a good flick in my opinion. I enjoyed it. It's entertaining. Just make sure you go in with the right expectations. Because I could see a lot of people going into this expecting a martial arts action horror film and being disappointed because of that. So just keep that in mind. That's not what this movie is. It's currently available on DVD and Blu-ray in the United States. So check this one out if you feel like it. Again, not a bad movie. Kind of like The Gangster, The Cop, The Devil that I covered, right? Not a bad movie to just put on one night when you want a good, entertaining Korean flick. Of the 3 Korean films that I covered this week, all of which were released in 2019, I would have to say that Exit is the one that kind of left a lasting impression on me. It feels the most different and creative out of the 3 films. So definitely put Exit on your high priority list. And then you could watch The Divine Fury, Gangster, The Cop, The Devil after that. So, as always, I'll see you next time.